Welcome everybody to HolloTalk Podcast. This is Jetpack Nik, and I'm here with a very, very, very special guest, my homegirl Lou. Say what's up to the people.
What's up, people? How's it going? We are out here.
Yeah, we are. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, just another day. You got to be grateful for every day you have on earth. So I'm just grateful I woke up today and I could do what I needed to do. Just, enjoy another wonderful day. How about yourself?
No, I've been good. Just, just relaxing, trying to prepare for this. Just stay updated on what's going on in the world. I mean, for the people who either not in the places where natural disasters have happened, they might not know, but yeah, the Northeast, Louisiana, a couple other places have been hit very, very hard. So shouts out to everybody. I hope that you all stay safe. Want to send a prayer out to everyone, to ensure safety and health. So we definitely got started off with that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Had to get in touch with some people, make sure some folks were okay. Almost my whole family is up and down the East Coast, so we did some checking in with folks. My grandma was good this morning, thank God. But it looks like Jersey got really hit. So
yeah,
just
prayers it was a tornado in Jersey. Like I never would have thought I'd see anything like that.
Tornado in Jersey. They're definitely gonna do a documentary about that. It's couple of months, I swear, but just praying everybody can, get to where they need to. This climate change thing is not a joke. So
yeah, not at all. Yeah, no, but we could talk about that all day. But this is about you though. So so for the people, can you let them know what you do, what you're about, who you are?
Absolutely. So I am a multi-creator for Fiber and Stage, creating vulnerable innovations in the name of liberation. So I speak that through my performance of sound, word, and movement, and I show that through my fiber arts, mainly through embroidery and crochet, mixing that with found objects to create really cool accessories and hanging art. I am a non-binary Black artist, and I am 29. So for my astrology-minded folks, yes, the Saturn return does suck, but we are getting through it with lots of grace and lots of fabulosity. I'm originally from the East Coast, but I kind of like to say I'm not really from anywhere at this point in time, just because I've lived so many places. I just recently moved back from 10 years in the Midwest, just wanting to be home. And the East Coast, at minimum, I can at least say is home. So we've lived in DC, we've lived in Connecticut, we've lived in New York, in 3 different boroughs.
Wow.
My brother is in Nashville. My other brother just moved out to California. So it is a little bit all over the place. But I do very much love the East Coast, and that's why I moved back recently. Yeah, I guess that's the elevator pitch.
Where is home for you?
I mean, for me, home is really in bits and pieces of the 5 boroughs of New York. For me, I feel most at home in libraries in Brooklyn and museums in Manhattan and parks. Most of my favorite places, like top 5 favorite places, end up being in New York City / Brooklyn. There's pieces of home in DC. I spent as a teenager one summer pretty much living in the museums of DC. I've been to almost every free museum, if not all of them, in DC, at least like 3 times. Right. So home is really in places where art is and places where nature is, up and down the East Coast.
Okay, I mean, shit, you gave me the complex answer. I just wanted to know where you was born.
Oh, where I was actually born was Brooklyn, so Methodist Presbyterian Hospital. I can't remember if that's what they call it now. But Presbyterian. hospital in Brooklyn, and then we lived in Queens until we moved when I was a couple years older. So yeah, that's the basic. But that's why I tell people, like, well, I was born here, but like moved pretty quick and like stuff like that. We all over the place. But yeah, that's why I was born technically in Brooklyn and then brought swiftly to Queens.
No, I got you. I definitely can relate, and I'm pretty sure a lot of the listeners can relate as well.
Yeah, just kind of being all over the place. But I like that. I know people, and I have friends, like really close friends, who are like, yeah, I've never been out of my state, and I'm like, I can't imagine that. Like I can, but I'm like, ooh, what would that be like? That's different, for me.
Yeah. So okay. So like let's actually tap into this, guy. I'm not sure if you actually had these conversations with people, but if you haven't, this is the first time, and we're going to do it live on the HolloTalk Podcast. So let's do it, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the fact that you have moved a lot and that you have a lot of different pieces, you take a lot of different things from the places that you've inhabited. Do you feel like that's contributed a lot to what you do as far as your art and how you express it? Or is it like one place is more influential than the next? Like how has those places been influential to you and your art?
I think that everything has been. So I think I do put it into these regions. So I've spent a good chunk of my like late teens, or I guess mid to late teens. So I was in Minnesota finishing high school, like my last 2 years of high school, and then was there for 7 years, and then did a very small stint in Charleston, Illinois. I don't recommend it. And I do not recommend that place in particular. And then did a 4 and change year stint in a town called Kalamazoo, Michigan, which is West Michigan. And so I have that sort of chunk, like that sort of Midwest chunk of my life. And then I have this sort of East Coast chunk of my life, which, because of how I ended up, like, it wasn't really my choice. Or I didn't make the choice as a young person, freely to go finish school in the Midwest. That was kind of something that just ended up happening. And me not coming home after that is just something that ended up happening that I think had a lot to do with the adults around me at that time. And so like not really choosing to live in the West and Midwest and feeling kind of stuck there and just always wanting to be home, but not really being able to a lot. So I really do break it up in this like Midwest chunk of my life and this like, home/East Coast chunk of my life. And I feel like the East Coast bits are all the things that like made me, like when I really like figured out who I was, as a very young adult. I realized that all the things that made me came from here. And one of the biggest ways that I realized that was through the ways in which white people specifically responded to me as a young Black artist, non-male, trans, queer Black artist in places like Minneapolis. Shout out to Minneapolis, shout out Black Table Arts, shout out Lane Jai, the crew, Riley, Kino, etc., what have you.
Yeah, shouts out to everybody. Shouts out to
everybody. We gotta do it. You know what I'm saying? So in that space, right, not understanding yet, as I came of age, what, being a Black person really looks like in a Midwest, even a Midwest city, right? Like not even just a Midwest town, but just a Midwest city, deep in there, and then also being out to the outer bits of Minnesota at different points in time. I think I crashed really quickly as a young adult, like 19, 20, coming into identity. New Jim Crow had come out recently. Right. Shout out to that book. And I was reading that and sort of coming of age. Trayvon Martin got murdered, rest in power. Yes. All of these things happened at once. And I started to realize that everything I was was so much tied to home. You know, the ways that I thought about the world, the ways that I lived, the food that I loved, like the colors that inspired me, the ways that I wore my hair, the ways that I wrote, you know, all of it came from home, you know, and it just started to clash for me, even in high school when I was like out in the burbs. There are a couple of suburbs. I ended up finishing my senior year of high school in a place called Edina, Minnesota. And for those of you who know Edina, Minnesota, it's an interesting situation. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about my own fear of being in spaces where rich white people controlled the space. And also, like, I realized very quickly, without really like consciously processing, like what that meant for me as like a young, you know, coming from a working class, working poor background, as somebody who, you know, was smart, but was not, you know, due to how public schools work, was just kind of falling through the cracks in terms of like where I was going to end up, you know, in terms of like life in school or college. So I say all of that to say that I feel like in the Midwest, I learned a lot like I feel like a lot of my consciousness work happened sort of on its own there, just by virtue of like the culture shock that started to happen as I became older in a person. Like, it didn't happen so much when I was like sort of siloed, you know, in high school. But as I like got out into the world, I was like, oh, these people just stare at me all the time, and I don't get why. And you know, I'm being asked if I can, you know, I can teach folks, you know, as a young Black person about the ghetto by like adult white people. You know, I am looking for community, you know, in these suburban white high schools that I've been bussed into, you know, and I'm finding it with the other 20 kids that have been bussed into, you know, these schools as well, who are very clearly singled out and who are very clearly, I would say, segregated in a sense of like, oh, those are the Minneapolis kids, and they just so happen to like all be Black. And in this case, you know, Minneapolis specifically has a very high African immigrant community, so there would be a lot of Somali kids, or just African immigrants in general, but definitely a lot of Somali kids, Ethiopian kids, and Black kids, and they all hung out together, and it was interesting to see like what other kids in my program, you know, who had left home to come go to the school thought about it, you know, and all of that. So I think that like who I am and who I naturally, you know, what I naturally exude and all of the great things that are me really do come from all of my homes on the East. And I think that has always sort of like run into my experiences in the Midwest, also pulling a lot from the Black culture of the Midwest. Let's you know, not get it twisted. You know, the Black cultures of specifically Kalamazoo and Minneapolis taught me a lot, and there is connection there. But just always getting that sort of like never feeling right at home and never really fitting, you know, especially at the intersections of queerness and transness, and being an artist and not, you know, ending up on College Pass and all that kind of stuff. So it does kind of like clash into each other. And I think the East Coast is sort of like my root sort of clashing with a bigger outside world that's mixed up in the Midwest.
You know, and it's interesting too, like that you said that, and you correct me if I'm wrong from quoting what you just said, because it was a whole lot, and I was listening intently.
It is like that.
but like I believe you said that you gained a lot of your consciousness from being in the Midwest, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
So
absolutely.
so to me, just listening to you talk about that, and in its entirety for the most part, and naming all the places that you mentioned, is interesting for me to hear you say that, because of the fact that you were in places like Brooklyn or Queens or DC, which are predominantly black areas, which I would think, like, if somebody would get their consciousness about who they are as a black person from the black places. But it's kind of on the flip side for you. You
It
got the
is.
consciousness from being in predominantly white places and having uncomfortable experiences being a black woman, or I'm sorry, binary, or non-binary, right?
Yes,
A black
non-binary.
non-binary person in those white places. So I was just curious to know, like what was the switch between being around a bunch of white people in uncomfortable positions, but gaining consciousness, versus being in predominantly black places with a lot of black history and not necessarily getting the conscious experience from those places.
That's a great question. That has a pretty simple answer to it. So I would say that as in terms of growing up, I pretty much just grew up on my own. And it was kind of just me and my sister sort of like trading off on sort of taking care of each other due to the situations with the adults in our lives. And I'm grateful today, at this version of myself, 29 years old, to like have my dad in my life and my brothers in my life and my sister in my life, and we have our family. Shout out to the fam.
Right.
And that is something that was not always there. In fact, that is something that we all as family members have had to untangle and look for our family, due to like how we grew up. My sister and I specifically grew up the longest together, like, from
Right.
birth. We were separated from our siblings and our dads at different times. But at the end of the day, me and my sister were always together.
Right.
And so we kind of just grew up on our own, and had a lot to deal with growing up. I mentioned we grew up pretty poor, and there were like a lot of other things going on in our home that just like made it really hard to like come of age. Like people talk a lot about like coming of age as like a teenager or like a young person, even like a preteen, and like having experiences and moments and like engaging in community, especially for Black kids, right?
Right.
At a young age, there are a lot of these conversations that we have around, coming into your own awareness of yourself, through the people around you and through the community around you, having, I think it's less so nowadays because of, redlining and this and that, and like sort of the destruction of the Black neighborhood, I would say. But there is, in a lot of Black families of all different kinds, just that sense of like, when you got older, like helping your grandmother cook, or like learning about music from your uncle, or like Christmases, or like, these different touch points of life that
Right.
that everybody's supposed to have, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for us as kids who came up in, unfortunately, a toxic household, what can happen, and what does happen a lot, is you don't get those touch points, and you're kind of just surviving throughout your whole childhood. And so for me, there wasn't a lot of space for self-awareness, or like discovering oneself through those moments of community. There was kind of just like going to school and, holding on to things that like kept me surviving, and that was books and art. And so when I
Right.
talk about art, people ask me like, how did you get into this, and what made you want to go down this particular path of artwork? And it's like I really just didn't have any other way of surviving in terms of like my mental space. Like, I got up every day and And I read and I read and I read and I read and I lived in the library. I was reading. They would tell me at like second grade that I had like an eighth grade reading level solely just because I was reading so much Harry Potter.
Right.
That had now, J.K. Rowling, you over here, but at that time, it was it for me, as a 9-year-old, I needed to go someplace. I needed to be somewhere else. And I do think there's a direct line from, I was reading like Harry Potter, I was reading Series of Unfortunate Events, I was reading, a little bit Animorphs, a little bit of Goosebumps, and all these things that just took you to other places. And then as I got a little bit older, that's when I discovered like books like Color Purple. Like I would look at the books that my mom had around the house, and that particular book and that particular movie, even though it came out a little bit before I was born, like the touch points that I ended up having, I would look through books at home and it would be Black women authors, and so I started to connect, with Black women that we had in the world at that time. And so that ended up being some more visual artists. So like I like hung on to Faith Ringgold with everything I had. And then from there I found Kara Walker, and as I got a little bit older, I got to watch the movie, the Color Purple movie. And then eventually I got to Audre Lorde as I got older. And I hung on to these words and these people and these places for dear life. And there is a direct connection for me from like as a second grader reading Harry Potter to Color Purple to Audre to an insanely amazing podcast called Welcome to Night Vale, which created the space for a podcast called Alice Isn't Dead, which is a sci-fi podcast about a Black lesbian woman truck driver, which if you talk to lesbians is so typical in the best way, who is looking for her wife who she thought was dead and is actually off hunting zombies, to Ava DuVernay's Wrinkle in Time, to N.K. Jemisin's Everything. You feel me? So like there is a direct line here for me, but I created that. So I think in terms of the question, how is it that I didn't get all of that, meaty finding myselfness and coming into consciousness at home is because there just weren't conversations. There wasn't really a home there. And so as I look back, like I remember different times, like I remember, President Obama and just like watching that on TV, like I remember these different touch points of things that happened in life, but there weren't really conversations about it at home just because we didn't really talk about anything at home. I think one of the few touch points I have is in my dad. And there are very few specific moments that I do have, and one of them is being in the car with my dad, and him and the music that he chose to play for us in the car. And so this is true of a lot of Black kids. Like a lot of us have this memory, right, of like mom or dad or grandma or grandpa or uncle, etc. When you were in the car with them, there was like a very specific set of music that was played. My dad is a longtime drummer, and drumming goes way back in our family, actually. My brother Adam plays the drums still in his church to this day, I do believe, at least up until a couple of years ago. And my sister played drums for a good minute. And then my mom's father, my grandfather, is Billy Cobham, who is a drummer that goes all the way back. Yeah, that's all the story. But so like the art does run in the family, and it's kind of the thing that we hold on to, and so my dad in the car, he had the same like brown car for a really long time, and he would always play like the same station at the same times. It would be like Tom Joyner a little bit, but like it would always be like oldies, funk, so much funk, because his favorite artist on the face of the earth is James Brown, to the point that he knows. Yeah, he knows James Brown catalog in and out, to the point that he can also play, like he can play the catalog, that like that's my dad. And so from that, that's where I got a lot of like, you know, the oldies, like that's where I learned about the Supremes. That's where I learned about the Temptations. You know, that's where I learned about Diana Ross. Like that's where I learned about everybody sort of like, you know, 70s and prior. And then my mom sort of brought, you know, the like, you know, end of disco, you know, 80s and up until modern. So I do have like these little touch points of like music and books, but it's all, you know, it's all based around the art. It's all based around books and stuff. So I think like I like to say to people, like, I wasn't really a person until I was like 18 or 19, because as I went off to college, I was just like, so what do I do now? How do I feel? Like, what do I, like, I don't have anybody controlling my space or my thoughts or my movements. Like, who am I? You know, I had no chance to ask that question until I was like off at college. I'll give college that one thing of like, it did at that time period give me a chance to breathe and be like, okay, I get to figure out who I am now. And so, you know, in my 18th and 19th year, sort of patching together who I was and just trying things on and trying to figure out who I was, that was like 2010, 2011. So again, we have, you know, Trayvon, we have New Jim Crow coming out, and this sort of language around mass incarceration starting to happen. Her name escapes me, but you know, she was the doctor who wrote that book was building, among others, all this language around, you know, like slavery never stopped. They just call it the prison industrial complex now. And me being like, holy crap. And then thinking about how does that affect me, you know, as a young Black person, and like never really feeling like a woman and trying to figure out what that meant for me. And like, you know, all of this identity stuff, like all that stuff happened all at the same time in like the same like second semester of my first time at college. And so like, it just kind of happened that way because it had to. And so I was, you know, I was engaging with feminists on campus as well. So I was gay, and it was all very separated, right? So I was engaging with Black activism and going to protests and like starting my organizing career, you know, on campus with LGBTQ spaces, and then like off campus in Black spaces, you know, and running into all of the issues of that and the struggles of that and the feelings of it, you know, figuring out what the feelings in the body meant when like people talked about, you know, these murders of Black people, and just not being in tune with my body enough yet to know what it meant, but knew that I was like it was exhausting me. You know, all of that had to happen at that time because that was the first time that I was able to have the space to like just do any self-discovery. Right.
I mean, shit. That's how I felt, kind of, sort of, like with my first time going to college too. Like I definitely felt like it was a not a culture shock per se, but more of like a, okay, now I gotta put it all to the test now. Like all the things that the people who I've grown up with, or the people who I allowed to teach me things, let's put it to the test now, see if this shit works.
Right. Yeah. And figure it out.
And it did. And it worked. At least for me, it worked. You know, again, like I'm pretty sure you've seen it because you were on the college campus and you experienced the college thing. Like I've seen it myself. I've seen a lot of people crash and burn also because they just didn't. Not that they didn't have the proper teachers, because I don't know. I wasn't there. I wasn't in their households. But at least from what I could see, they had a lot of growing up to do. They didn't know how to maneuver in the world.
And that's the thing.
You
had to figure it out. And in a lot of ways I did crash and burn, right? Like I went back to college like 3 different times and just eventually was like, no, we're gonna figure. And then I found, you know, and then I moved to Philly and I was like, maybe I'll go back. Maybe we'll like just do a last time and maybe that'll get me through. And then I found Rec and I was like, well, and for those who don't know, Rec Philly is an amazing artist. It's an insult to call it an artist.
No, yeah, we definitely going to touch.
Yeah, we're gonna touch on that. You know,
you
so
beat
like
me
just
to it.
finding the way. You know, there's different paths for everybody, and you will crash and burn. And honestly, that has a lot to do with growing up and being like, oh snap. But it also has a lot to do with how we like structure this the system of education in general, but specifically higher education. So like, yeah, people crashed, and people would crash early. And sometimes people will crash late. And you know, I think that's when a lot of growing up does happen, when you sort of see people being like, oh snap, folks are kind of dropping like flies sometimes, or like, things happen, or like when people, I remember when conversations we would have around money as a very like early 20s person, when you were like, I don't know how I'm going to pay for this. And I didn't realize that needed to, like, just when they don't tell you stuff and you're like taking out loans and you're just like, well, we just have to do this, right? Like, there's so much around that. So it definitely had a similar experience seeing people around me as well.
Okay, so let me ask you this, because, like, again, just revert back to what we were just talking about, the whole crash and burn thing, and seeing people crash and burn. Like, I think that's like a natural part of evolution when it comes to at least being within a college kind of environment. Like, you're around a bunch of late teens, early 20s people who, the 1% who actually knows what the fuck they're doing, like they're somewhere else. Like, they're not even like where we are. The other 99% of us are doing what you said, taking out loans we don't know we got to pay back, or fucking like doing anything. But at least for me, I think that I was able to get through it with being intact for the most part, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and all that good shit, is because I reached out to a lot of people, like professors or staff, or just my core group of friends who were going through the same experiences that I was going through at the time. I think that played a very, very, very major part in my growth and success, in not only staying the course, but finishing the job also. So I wanted to ask you, like, did you currently have a team that allowed you to get you to that point, or has pushed you to become the artist that you are today? I know I'm dope, right? I'm dope.
Listen, you're with it. You have a talent, my friend. I am there. I think for me, a team.
Yeah.
Is there a squad? I would have to say no. And I think that part of it is just kind of not knowing that you're supposed to have a team behind you, and that you're supposed to, and then just like not running into the right people, right? So when I was at St. Catherine University, shout out St. Kate's, shout outs to the Katies, you know what I'm saying? I did run into, I remember a lovely woman whose name I definitely don't remember, but she, if you ever hear this, she was our advisor for what we called Pride at the time, because they wouldn't let us call it a gay straight alliance. You know, back in the day, it was always a gay straight alliance. They call it different things nowadays. This is back, 2010, 2011, of course. And so we called it Pride, and it was like people respecting different identities or something. Like, that's what they would let us call it. For those who don't know, St. Catherine University is technically a like Christian school. And so there were a lot of things that we ran into, being queer, trans students on campus, being feminist students on campus. And we had a woman who like helped us get through a lot of stuff, especially as I was coming into my trans identity and starting to also understand resistance to femme, and we go back and forth about the language, but femme, just non-binary folks in general. So a lot of the conversation, in the queer community being like, oh, okay, you're trans and you're AFAB, what we call assigned female at birth, so then you're definitely a trans man. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess that's what I'm doing. And then just wrestling with that and being like, that's not it. And so I do remember having some of those conversations with her, and of course, this is with a lot of white people, right? So still in this space where the queer and the Black, I have yet to find a space for that to intersect at this time, and continue to have that struggle, in the Midwest specifically, So there were folks here and there. Specifically, there is one person during those St. Kate's years, who I have to mention. Pamela Fletcher. I do believe it is Dr. Pamela Fletcher. And if it wasn't then, it probably is now, because she's about that life. She was the only Black woman that I experienced on staff as a teacher who really taught me how to write. And she was that teacher who like ripped you limb from limb and was like, you're gonna do this like this, and this is how this needs to happen.
I
and
had
get
one
it
of those
together.
professors like that too.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
She was that for me. And if of all the people that I ran into, she is somebody who I come back to year after year after year after year and be like, yo, remember how you were like, this is it? And she was like, it's not it. Get it together. And you just kind of did. And I think for me, as somebody who always just had to get it together, she made a really great impact on me. And because she was dealing with a lot of white privileged kids, you know, and there weren't a lot of Black kids at the school, like, and a lot of them, again, you know, I ran into a lot of African immigrants, you know, either one generation or like first generation, either one generation removed or like first generation, you know, but I wasn't running into like a lot of Black American people at the school. And the you know, again, the experience I was having outside of school was very like cishet, what we call cisgender heterosexual Black space, which at the time, you know, I was just learning things. I was just sort of coming into stuff. So at the time, like, that did what it needed to do for me. But it definitely wasn't where I needed to stay. And so being in sort of all of these fractured places and running into, you know, Professor Fletcher, Dr. Fletcher, and, you know, not having an experience of like comfort, but having an experience of like, you can do anything and therefore I expect you to. And that was the first time I had to like be like, well, I guess I can, and I guess I have to. Okay. But you know, in terms of like a team around me, I didn't really have a mentor until like a couple of years ago. And I think that's because of a lot of different things, but I also think it's because when you know, there is, I think in the Black community, you know, a very serious, especially even more nowadays, but it's always been this thing of like, okay, you know, we're going to get you to college and we're going to like lift you up. Like there is this like lifting up that happens of Black children. It's like, get to college, you know, get through. You know, I think after a certain point, there can be a drop off of like, okay, you got into college, like you're going to be fine. And it's like, actually, no.
Hell no.
but there is this sort of like lifting up that happens and not coming from that and just kind of like, having to go through, like I definitely went through the college application process by myself, in terms of like doing applications and figuring out what, you know, was right to say and figuring out how to like keep my grades up and just struggling and just like, you know, when I was in my boarding school program, you know, getting shifted to these other schools in Minnesota, there just wasn't room for much of anything except like getting through to the next thing. It's like, okay, I need to like just pass this class and I need to just get into a college. Like I just need to do something.
Right.
Desperately, like I remember desperately, I was like, I do not want to stay here in Minnesota. I do not want to be here. I want to go home. So can somebody just take me home and can we figure this out later? You know, I remember in my head as a senior just being like, and just sort of, and everybody's just like, oh, you got it. You know, sort of a thing. And so I think coming from that sense of like, well, I guess this is what we're doing, and that just being what it was for so long, you know, not really having networking skills as a younger person, not really knowing where to go, not really having the energy to figure out anything except like getting up and like going to class because like I guess that's what you want, like, you know, was supposed to do, until I got pretty far along in my sociology degree at that time. I had changed my major a couple of times. I had come to this sort of consciousness realizing that like there were all these white feminists. This is also when we started to talk a little bit more as folks our age, like, you know, for me, millennial age folks, like started talking more in Black spaces about like bringing back Black feminism and like what the new, what the new iterations of like white feminism, you know, were in those times. And, you know, as I was creating art with folks, you know, I realized I was running into a lot of walls and a lot of like, unseen bias from folks of just being like, y'all don't know anything about any Black person at all. And it's harming me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I wanted to be in women's studies, but I also like knew that I wasn't a woman and I didn't understand how I fit in this place. Like, I just fit nowhere. And so like, I remember going to one of the advisors at one point and crying and just being like, I don't think I can do this. And then realizing in the next year, I was like, so I'm like going in my third year of this degree, and they're all white people. Like, there's all, like, you want me to study all of these white men, and I don't understand. Like, I didn't realize that that's like what some of the roots of sociology was. They didn't talk to you a lot about W.E.B. Du Bois, and other folks. Like, they didn't, and even still, I just wasn't connecting to it. They were like, no, they were all men and almost all white. And I just can't, and I just started like, as more people started to get murdered, right? Because the whole, Trayvon Martin got murdered, and like that went on for a while, and then like more names started to come out. Like, this is 2010, 2011, and a little bit earlier, like the late aughts is when people started like touting names, if you remember, and saying names. Like, that's when Black Lives Matter, if I remember correctly, like I don't remember what year it was, but it was like either like 10, maybe 12, where like Black Lives Matter were starting to happen. Like, all of these things were brewing. And so in me, I felt all of that. I felt all of that ancestral generational trauma that I did not understand. And so when I think I started to just get triggered in these spaces, not realizing it, but just being like, this is not it. Like, I have to get out of here. This is not it. So I think that like, I didn't really have a chance to like find a team per se, just because there was just a lot of ebb and flow and a lot of change, and I just for the longest time was almost never where I needed to be, and I think I didn't really start to find a tribe, if you will. I would I wouldn't say a team per se in terms of like people around you to like lift you up in sort of the professional or academic space, but like when I found my friends, my squad of folks who I mentioned earlier, when I started to see, people like Tish Jones, shout out to Tish Jones in Minneapolis, and when I started to learn about like Saul Williams, and when I started to like read more poetry, when I started to go back and like listen to the roots and listen to Tribe, and listen to Prince, and really just go deep into the music. When I started to listen to Kanye, and Andre 3000, when I started to listen to Queen Latifah, when I started to listen to like Lupe, like pre, that was about, pre that, whole thing. When I started to like listen and understand how much I was meant to love music, when I started to write poems and just try to get jobs as a teaching artist, when I started to go to plays, Kino Ival, who's in my squad, who I mentioned earlier, he and his brother had like one-person plays when they were much younger. This was like maybe 2011 at Pillsbury House Theater. Shout out Pillsbury House, who gave me one of my first jobs as a teaching artist, teaching kids about hip hop, and spoken word. When I started to go to Golden Time, where all of the open mics were in those days, which was a Black-owned cafe, it still is, to my knowledge, in St. Paul. When I just started to go to open mics and I started to listen to poets, when I started to hang out at Blue Nile, which, Jesus, the street harassment, but things of that nature, when I started to like just I started to like make friends. And so I met my two first friends, who the first people who I ever met who were Black, queer, and non-binary, Lane and Jai. And that led me, they led me to other people. They brought me into the community. And then it was like, oh, Okay, this is a thing. So, like, did I have a team? No. Did I find a tribe and did I kind of like find a way? Yes. Was it the poetry spoken word scene in Minneapolis? At that time, I can't speak for today, but at that time, between like 2011 and up until I left in 2015, oh Lord, the misogyny in the poems, the ways in which Black men talked about women, that we now call Hotep or Ashy or whatever, what have you, if you will. No space anywhere, nobody really talking about transness and the intersections, nobody. You know what I'm saying? But Lane and Jai really led me and just said, "Oh, come here." And we're all still tight to this day. We met Riley later on, and Riley is now an amazing publisher. Works for an amazing bookstore and is in publishing and doing great work as a Black person, bringing Black books to Minneapolis, St. Paul. Lane and Jai are an insanely amazing visual artist. The places that we've gotten to in our 10 years, it's wild. But like without them and without Kino, who came up as a poet and actor, and then started Black Table Arts, which is a collaborative Black artist that I mentioned earlier, in Minneapolis, started that, in 2015 with a table and a banner, and now has a building in South Minneapolis where Black folks just gather as Black folks, and has been integral to keeping organizers safe on the ground in the past year, specifically with murders of George Floyd, Dante Wright, and all names that have not been named, et cetera, have you. You know what I'm saying? So we grew in that. But for me, it was just having people in my life who cared, and it was having friends in my life. These are the people that introduced me to B. Steadwell, who at that time was doing videos of vocal loops on YouTube and doing like Robin covers. And I was like, that's who I want to be. I want to make people feel how they make me feel. You know what I'm saying? And I just wouldn't have run into these things if it wasn't for them. So, now as somebody who's like had 10 years of a fledgling and yet still career as an artist, that's where I learned things, from, me and Lane and Jai living in a house that ended up condemned on the North Side in Minneapolis, singing and raising money and starting nonprofits to care for people like us, and making art. That's what we did. We've always been our own collaborative, and that led me to understand what I needed in terms of like, okay, this is what friendship and love looks like, and that in and of itself, I think, got me here.
So you said all of that.
I said many
things. And said you had no team, but then you just went on a 20-minute tangent explaining all of the people who've helped you along the way, which sounds like a tribe and a team to me.
Yeah, when you say team, I'm like, all of these people came at different times and different things. When I guess in my head, I envision team as like, a group of people that like, came from, it kind of came in a hodgepodge. So like, yeah, now it's a team. I think it hodgepodge it way there. Now it definitely is a team for sure.
Yeah, of course, people who just help you, or not even help you, but shape you into being what it is that you envision yourself always becoming, or at least pushing you to achieving the objectives that you have set for yourself, the objectives and goals. And it sounds like you named a lot of people who are pushing you to that point. So, like I said, it sounds like a tribe to me.
Yeah, definitely a tribe. Definitely a tribe. I think I'm a poet, so I get caught up with words. I get caught up with words and figure words. So yeah, there's certainly a tribe, and there's people that have added on to that. My best friend Paris, my sister, my dad, and my brother. It all kind of comes together and is sort of this nucleus constantly shifting and moving in space, as life goes.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be people that get added on to that and things like that. So, so it's a lot of time and a lot of creative space for you to fill. So, I'm definitely interested to see who is a part of your team slash tribe or whatever word is best suited for
Yeah.
for how you want to describe the people.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
speaking
for
of
sure.
which, but speaking of which, I want to talk about Rec Philly. So
For
Rec
sure.
Philly, I would definitely consider that to be one of, if not the best community or creative spaces in the city of Philadelphia, which
Absolutely.
you happen to be a part of, and me, like I'm not technically a part of it, but I'm a part of
Yeah. Oh,
it.
clearly.
So,
Absolutely.
I want you to let the people know like what Rec Philly is, and then after you do that, I'll ask you some more questions about Rec Philly and your part in Rec Philly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So Rec Philly is a place for artists to gather, work, and be uplifted, I would say, more than anything else. Like Rec Philly is a space, but what Rec Philly really is for me is the spirit of investment in artists in a way that centers Blackness specifically. That is what I feel like I learned like at my starting point. Starting point is kind of your introduction to Rec Philly, and you're able to build some goals, and you just get uplifted. It is a very spiritual space. I would believe. I do
Definitely.
believe. And I see that spirit come through. Specifically Will Toms, who is the co-founder and kind of brings the vision of the space. And for me specifically, in my experience, Scarlett all
Shouts
day.
out to Scarlett.
Scarlett,
That's the
girl.
homie.
Shout outs to Scarlett. Scarlett was the person who helped me understand that I could do this. I had a lot of like not great experiences in first moving back home and moving back to Philly. It had been a rough couple of months, and I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. I came here to do my art, but like this society does not value that. And I knew that, and yet I am here and I don't know what I'm doing. All I knew, and I accidentally found Rec. Somebody was like, "Oh, you're an artist. You know." I was like, "I don't know." And they said here, and I was like, "Oh my god, thank
Right.
goodness," because I didn't really know what I was gonna do. And so Rec is very much this a space that is aligned in physicality, spirit, and intentionality of being behind and for artists, and specifically intentionally creating spaces for them to develop themselves, and also just having a place to go, to work and stuff. So there's all kinds of studios of just every kind that you can think of that you have access to, and then you just have access to the space. There's a fridge. There's comfy space. There's nooks to work in. There's just everything you could really really need as an artist.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm not a technical member of Rec Philly, but I know a lot of people at Rec Philly, so I
Yeah,
pop up from time to time, and
absolutely.
at least got to experience the environment a little bit, the people, and just get to meet a bunch of dope people like I met you at Rec Philly.
Yes,
So, shouts out to them for that, But
absolutely.
at least for me, I definitely see exactly what you're saying about how much of a like a comfortable space it is. It's a
Mhm.
comfortable space that allows you to not only tap into your creativity and your creative mind, but it allows you to collaborate with a bunch of people who
Mhm.
also share that same gift in whatever way that they express it, but it's still, the creative gift. I think that part of it is like so fucking amazing because,
Mhm.
a lot of people don't necessarily have the networking abilities or networking skills to
Right.
just go out and talk to a random person on the street. But
Hello.
being that you have a space where everybody is kind of on the same mission to express
Mhm.
themselves wholeheartedly and create their art, whether that's music, podcast, drawing, painting, whatever the case may be. It all speaks the same language that we all understand as creatives. So
Mhm.
having that space is very, 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 very dope. Especially for people who don't know what Rec Philly is or haven't experienced that. That's
Yeah.
one of those things that I wish was everywhere, like Rec New York or Rec Connecticut or
They
Rec
gonna do it. Listen.
whatever, Rec California. Like
Yeah, they gonna do it.
They need it for sure,
Mm-hmm.
because that's definitely one of the things that I wish a lot of people had a chance to experience, being that a lot of us are creatives in our own way. Like we don't have the outlets or the means to express it the way we want to express it, and Rec Philly is one of those things.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I can't tell you how many times as specifically a writer coming up and a teaching artist, just trying to get jobs, just trying to be like, okay, I know I can teach. I know I have the ability to do this and do this well. I just kind of need a shot. Like I just kind of need to be like, how do you know the right people to be around? Like me personally, I'm not the type of person to sort of just be going to random events and just like hoping that I run into the right person. You know, I get that. Monica McKnight specifically said on your last episode, like there isn't a job that she hasn't gotten without networking. Right. You know, and I am here for it. I get the networking thing. I am down for it. I am down to like organically vibe with folks, you know, which is why I go to like every single rec event. But like in terms of like outside of that, like as an introvert with anxiety, I'm just like, where? What and where and how and what is happening? You know what I'm saying? I do want to be intentional about the spaces that I'm in, especially because time is precious and folks don't have enough time for rest already. You know what I mean? And so it is this kind of thing of like, how do you know where to go and like where you're going to meet that person so that you can get that foot in the door and, you know, all of those kinds of things. You know, having rec as a container, and as a rec, you know, rec will like recommend events and like stuff like that. And so it's like, now mind you, I ain't really going out like that because the Rona is not a joke. She is coming back. She is not gone. But you know, rec events is usually like less people. Everybody does wear masks. Like to your point, it is kind of on the same page of like, all right, we're all here doing what we need to do, you know, and then they bring in folks. They just bring folks to you, you know, and you can kind of take it from there. Meeting like Virgil Gatson the same night I met you, who's like an amazing dancer, who I realized teaches class in Philly. Awesome. So that's like a touch point that I can have. I can go take class from him. Now, again, I still don't know how I am about class, but I'm desperate. Like as a dancer, I'm like desperately have not been to class since like a smooth January, February 2020, you know, so like having just those little opportunities and being like, oh, and you're just always meeting somebody. You're always meeting somebody, especially when you go to all of the events, when you do room to room, like when you go to, you know, the goal sessions, when you know, just give yourself those little moments to engage, like those can be the moments, but also just getting access to like, you know, I just recently got a job that like, you know, doing writing for this awesome website who wants to teach folks about Africa.
Congratulations.
You know, beautiful opportunity that I got from the rec job board. You know what I'm saying? It's networking, but it's all in these different ways, and it doesn't put pressure on any one thing, which is what helps me a lot.
No, yeah, of course. Like I said, it puts a bunch of people who are like-minded in one space and say, hey, let's just see what the hell happens. And again. And again, the one thing I find very interesting is that like a lot of creatives are not that like extroverted. Like
no,
a lot of creatives are not extroverted at all.
I mean, we don't like talking to people.
I don't know. It's interesting because like shit, I have a podcast, right? So I talk to people damn near all day, every day. But I like to think I'm like kind of sort of introverted, just a little bit. I'm like 51-49, like introverted, extroverted. Like like when it comes to it, I can do it with the best of them. But I prefer to just be on my, you know, on my chill, listening to music or some shit like that.
Exactly. You know? Especially because I really do always have my headphones in, and I am just kind of always working. I'm just like, listen, I work a like 9 to 10 hour day with transportation. Like, unless you got something for me that's like, we're here, unless we're vibing, it's like, I really only do have time. And I think this is true of a lot of people. It's like, we working, you know what I'm saying? We got things to do. We have things to take care of. Folk, like, you know, I myself am a single person without any kids or pets at this particular time. That is not true of most folks. You know what I'm saying? One of awesome person, shout out Jax, you know, awesome photographer who I met at Room to Room, you know, like is out here definitely coming back and forth. I know from farther away, like has all types of responsibilities, but is out here, you know, taking pictures and putting them up every day, you know? So we all have different responsibilities and different, you know, things in our lives that we have to take care of. And, you know, I think that is the magic of rec. Like there is a magic spell that happens in that place, and you're just sort of able, you just always run into somebody who's really amazing. And whether it's something for that moment, or it's something, you know, that happens down the line, like doing a podcast or getting a job, like it just encourages you. For me, it's just like, I'm always running into somebody every day that's like, hey, like, how are you? Like, it's so nice. People remember your name. Like, I can't tell you how many people remembered my name after meeting me like once, and I was like, how is that happening? Like that type of stuff doesn't happen, like, for me personally. So just like this simple aspect of community of like, people know who you are, people see you working, you know, you see people working. That's its own magic that I just think it's, to your original point, is unique to rec.
Yeah, I mean, shit, like even just outside of rec Philly, like just being able to have people be around you that's working or you know, at least doing something productive, or at least something that's in your field or creative space, I think is extremely helpful, because it feels like you're on the right path to achieve whatever goals or objectives you have set for yourself. Still here?
Hey, sorry. I think something happened on my end. I like froze up, and then my Wi-Fi must have went out for a second. But we're back.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, we're back. It's all good. It's all good.
So what
Technical
was the last thing you were
difficulties.
saying?
No, I was just saying that you know, like even outside of Rec Philly, just being
Yes.
in that space, like, you know, just being around people who are doing productive things, or you know, doing
Mhm.
things that you can relate to, or things that, you know, relate to exactly what it is you're trying to do or get to where you're trying to
Mhm.
go. It's a magic in that as well. Even if you're
Mhm.
not in you know, a creative space like Rec Philly, just
Mhm.
seeing those people or being around those people allows you to be like, damn, I'm really on the right path to achieve those goals or those objectives.
Absolutely. I would absolutely agree, because that's what, you know, I figured out how to get up in the morning again and be like, okay, all right, okay, we're good, we can do this. You know what I'm saying? Like, I would hear Scarlett in my head, like for the first like couple of weeks after my starting point, I would hear Scarlett in my head, and I would just be remember this moment, remember that this happened, remember like what she said, just get up every day and like feel your body and be like, okay, we can do this. Like, no matter, like, nothing can come for you at that point.
Right.
You take it out of rec with you immediately. Like, you know, I think one of the things that does join us all as people who come in and out of rec is like, we are just looking for something to sort of like hold on to keep us going to that next moment, to keep us going, you know, to get to that next gig, to that job that will get us that stability, or to that place where it's just like we can breathe because now we can make.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Like, that leaves with you because we're all open to that. And I
Yeah.
think that's what makes the space what it is. Like, never at rec have I felt like you know, it doesn't feel like other places. It's not, you know, it's not like an open mic space or, you know, other arts places that I've been to. It's very safe, and it's very safe, and it's so safe that you can push yourself to do anything. Like, it's safe enough for you to be able to experiment with anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've like walked around with my shoes off. I've like taken naps. I've like left stuff and like ran errands and all this kind. Like, it's home. Like, you know,
Right.
for me, like just the little things of being like, I am safe here. Like, that's not always something that people get. And just every time you run into somebody, you know, whether it's staff or just, you know, members or folks who are running around, everybody's always like, hi, how are you? Like, you know, energy, the vibes are always
Yep.
there, you know, the vibration is always where it needs to be, you know, no matter what. Like, if there is ever a moment where I'm just like, I can't do this, like, I'll look at the wall, or I'll, you know, look at, you know, I'll watch other people around, or I'll see somebody I know and they'll smile at me and say hi, or, you know, there's almost always somebody that I know or that I've met there, you know, and you make the commitment, you know, anytime I meet somebody at Rec New, you know, I'm always like, you know, it is all love, never be a stranger, like, you can always say hi, you know, because I know I'm getting that feeling, and I want folks to get that back from me, because that's part of what happens, you know, that energy spins and spins and spins, and that's part of what makes it what it is.
Very, very true. I can support that 110%. Like, I've experienced it and seen it with my own two eyes. So I can definitely co-sign everything that you said for sure. So I want to ask you too, like, do you have any like anything coming up that you're doing, like any shows, any projects that you're working on that's coming up very soon? And if you do, can you let us know?
We do. So I have a couple of different projects that I am working on. So I do have a novel that is happening at this particular time, a sci-fi fantasy novel, first in a series. It's looking like, exploring the sci-fi fantasy world from a perspective of a working class Black trans millennial who is living in the late stages of the climate crisis, and connecting that, you know, with the sci-fi space of the world of World of Gods. And so that is going to be coming out in late winter, early spring of next year. And then before that, I have I call it my first chapbook, but it's really not, because it's been we've been working on this, John, since a smooth 2015. And I started it, I put out the first version of it in 2016, and now it's in its, what I would say, its final version. So my, foundational, I'll say, poetry chapbook called Dirt, which is a collection of poems that have followed me for the first decade of my career, that just talk about, again, from a Black trans point of view, centering, not so much centering non-maleness, but just centering non-binariness, and the everyday life of healing through trauma and what that looks like on the page. And it's a very interesting space because I combined it with a visual art sort of space. So there's like mind maps on the pages, scans of journal entries, and photos of like piles of clean dishes, and just all these different spaces of like everyday life, moving through the world as a millennial Black trans person who's just like shedding trauma, and what that looks like on the page. Right. So that's going to be, that's getting sent out to publishers like right now. So that is going to be like early 2022. Folks will be able to buy that. And then this fall, in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be dropping accessories from my fiber collection, pieces from my embroidery collection in the next couple of weeks. So like mid-September, early October at the latest. And you can find out about all this stuff on the social medias, mainly on Instagram at LU_LVE So Lou Love, if you will. And yeah, right now I'm very much in the space of like publishing, like putting stuff out.
Gotcha.
And so like things are very much in the works right now, and I chronicle my journey with the work on Instagram specifically, on a pretty much daily basis. So right now I've been putting out a lot of freestyle dance pieces, and putting out recordings of my practices with reflections on my Instagram reels, and there's a specific series that I do that with. So that is, 5 to 6 days a week. I'm putting that out, sort of chronicling the writing process, just in pictures, as I reach different milestones. So I like got the story circle written out. Shout out to Dan Harmon for the story circle. Rick and Morty, so when I got that done, I sort of, talked about that process, and now I'm kind of fleshing out the characters. And so I'll be talking about that process soon, in the next couple of days on Instagram. And then it's just going to be like my favorite part, which is just like writing all of the time. So I'm definitely going to be engaging in NaNoWriMo, which for those who don't know is National Novel Writing Month, which is where, I'm just going to kind of like go ahead and see how much we can get out. And then, just chronicling all of that sort of in a public, quote unquote, space is very important to me. Just because I don't think we see the rawness of that as much. I very much come from a place of like a reforming perfectionist. So I have taken it upon myself as I create these new pieces that are just like, the goal is to publish. When you go to Room to Room at Rec, they talk about, I think it was like the guy who created Patreon. They show this video where he was like, I was creating stuff, but I wasn't publishing things, and I do think there's a balance between that. But I think for me, the era right now is very much like, oh, we can do this. We can just get stuff out. So there's a lot of things that are being worked on. Also working on a couple of EPs as well, and just making music, but definitely excited for the books that are coming out starting early next year, and really excited to like get into the holiday season and all that stuff with the fiber arts work. So keep posted on Instagram. I post everything on there, especially on my story, so you can keep posted there, and keep up with what's going on. And as things are coming out, there will be very, very big announcements, so you'll definitely know. And I'm just excited to just show the latest version of myself as an artist. It's a really dope time.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely a dope time for us creators. We ain't got shit else to do but to create right now.
You know what I'm saying? Because they are gonna lock it down now. They're gonna lock this joint right back down. And it's going.
They fucking need to.
Yeah.
They definitely need to. It's
not a game. Not a game.
Like you said, Ms. Rona ain't no joke.
It's no joke. She is not playing, and nor is Mother Nature.
Oh yeah.
Like nobody is
Nature
playing.
been on a tear.
Listen, nobody is playing any games with us. Okay, we need to get it together.
All right, so I got one more thing for you, but before we get to that, like I know you dropped your Instagram, but I don't know if you got the social medias, but if you do, drop all your social media so people know where to find you and to stay tuned for what you got coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Lou Love IG is mainly for things are at. I am on LinkedIn, Lou Lu /Edie, like Edie's ice cream. I know we got that out east, so y'all know what that means. And website is brewing, but you can also find me on Tumblr at LU-LVE. And I'll put all this in the chat for you so that it can be written down, etc., what have you. But that's mainly where I'm at. And yeah, was that everything? I feel like I might have forgotten the whole question, but that's where I am on the internet, and that's where you can find me.
All right, so this is the last thing, and I'm gonna let you go. All right, so I want you, if you want to, drop 3 gems for the people to take away from this conversation that they can apply to their everyday life.
Yes, I'm so happy you asked that because I prepared for that question.
Oh, all right. Okay.
So I mean, based on the conversation, I maybe
or just in general. It doesn't have to be specific to the conversation.
Yeah. something I'm still learning. Number one, rest twice as much as you think you should or you think you need to. Period. Just period. When you have no doors open to you, give yourself the time and space to build one, and then bring folks by the hand with you. That's the main goal that I have as a person. And then just as a general note, I know I brought up some different names of folks and talked a little bit about activism, police brutality. Third, just very much being some folks that we need to continue to lift up. Breonna Taylor, Marsha P. Johnson, Breonna Taylor, Marsha P. Johnson, Pooh Johnson, Sandra Bland, Brayla Stone, Cece McDonald, Miss Coco, Tierra Marie Lewis, every Black trans woman, every Black woman, every Black trans woman, period, Elijah McClain, and every name that we know and that we have had the burden to remember as Black people. Keep saying them, and we need to, as a collective, go back to that first one and give ourselves the chance to rest, because remembering the names in and of themselves is its own work. So always got to say that at the end as my last bit.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. Listen, I want to thank you so much for coming on today and talking with me and just sharing so many different gems. Like even outside of those three, like it was so many gems sprinkled in with that conversation. So I truly want to say thank you for that. And thank you for having this conversation with me. I truly appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. It's really nice. I don't always get a chance to talk about the work, and as I talk about it, I learn so much about myself and about everything. So I'm all about reflection. So these kinds of things are great for me. So thank you so much for having me. It was absolutely
of course. This is what the platform is for, to allow people to express their opinions, express what they do, who they are, what they're about, and have the world hear it.
Absolutely. We need it. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And I want to say thank you to all the HolloTalk Podcast listeners and supporters for supporting us every week. We appreciate y'all. And Lou, thank you again for it. And whenever you drop, though, like all your projects, come on back so we can talk about it, all right?
Absolutely. I would love to. Can't wait.
All right. Well, you enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk with you soon, all right?
All right. Sounds good.